What's up, everybody? Time for us to have a chat. Recently, I've been feeling a little stagnant. I've been feeling a little kind of trapped, like in a glass box of emotion. But more importantly, that glass box had a glass ceiling, and I feel like third party is slowing down, and I was feeling kind of less challenged, and I think that's where For Dummies came from. I think that's where Sit Down Saturday came from. If it teases the court, I just wanted to do something different. So recently I got the idea of doing a Star Wars channel, like just doing a second channel to be able to have Star Wars conversations that wouldn't necessarily work for the audience that's mainly watching my channel. And I saw this through to some fruition. I set up the channel, I uploaded 2 weeks worth of videos, I kind of got ahead of the game so that I would still have time to do my regular channel and nothing would kind of skip a beat. And I started kind of getting concerned about the amount of work it was going to take for both. And then I started thinking, I was like, there was a time where I used to do 7 videos a week. For years, I did a video almost every day of the week. You guys that have been around for a while remember that era. And then I kind of backed it down to just Transformer stuff on my channel, mainly because the algorithms weren't going to hit for anything else I was doing, the Legends and the import stuff and the Star Wars stuff and all that. So I set up this other channel and I was like, well, I'll just set up new algorithms. But then I was like, I'm not sure if I really want to do that. I think I liked the idea, the challenge of doing that, but I kind of felt like I was, I don't know, playing into the game instead of just doing what I wanted. So I'm just gonna do what I want. And what I want to do is more Star Wars stuff. So I talked to the Patreon folks first about it. They are very supportive, so I wanted to make sure that I was doing right by them because they were getting a lot of this stuff through Patreon. They were 100% on board. And what I've decided to ultimately do is make my channel mainly about Transformers and Star Wars. I've never hid the fact on this channel that Star Wars is my main love, and then underneath that is DC Comics, and underneath that was Marvel Comics, and then it was Transformers. Transformers might go up a notch now, though, after Endgame for me, but that's neither here nor there. It's one of the nice things about Transformers that maybe we should discuss on another time, but like if you're a G1 fan, there's no hurting it. It's a set time and space, it exists during this period, and nothing can come along and screw it up. Like it just is what it is, in the great words of, I believe, Socrates or Plato. But anyway, what you might already be here for in regards to my channel isn't going to change. I'm still going to review Transformers. I pretty much review every third-party thing that comes out that I can. However, those releases are getting fewer and further between, so it's not that really challenging to review more stuff anymore. We'll still be doing the For Dummies, still be doing If It Teases the Court, we'll still be doing Sit Down Saturday. So none of that will change. What will change is there will be more content under the show Skull Wars, and that's where we'll be covering Star Wars stuff. What are we going to be covering? 3 3/4 selectively. 1/12 scale SH Figuarts and Black Series, 1/6 scale Hot Toys, and 1/4 scale stuff from time to time. We're also going to be having discussion. These discussions are going to be both on the movies and on the toys, specifically related to Star Wars. And then we'll also be doing some theories, because theories are fun and I like to play around with that kind of stuff. I enjoy it. We'll even be taking some of the conversations that we have on Nerd Rage and some of the conversations that we have on Force Sensitive underneath Nerd Rage and expounding upon those here. Now, something else I know I need to do, because people have been asking for it, is a Cribs update, and I will be doing it. However, in the Cribs videos, you never really get to really zero in on one collection. You kind of just take it all in, so to speak. So what I want to open up Skull Wars with is a collection tour just around my Star Wars stuff, because it is plentiful. Now, when I shot this footage, I was under the consideration that I was going to be doing it on a new channel. So if it feels strange in that regard, that's why. But it's still a pretty in-depth look at the amount of stuff that I have acquired. Speaking of things I acquired, my buddy Tyler the Collector did this for me and gave it to me, and I was very touched by it. So we didn't get to talk about that because that was just given to me last night when we recorded Nerd Rage 200. And I got the archive series as well to kind of look through. So there's plenty of stuff coming in regard to Star Wars. The good news is if you don't like Star Wars, you're still getting the regular content that you normally get here. If you do like Star Wars, you're getting more content than you would normally get here. We're gonna step up production a little bit. So with no further ado, let's take a look.
So we have Star Wars in just about every room in the house,
which includes our library, where we have the Star Wars bookends. Funny story about these, the first ones that arrived damaged, and we got a second set for free, and that arrived damaged as well. So we just cut our losses, glued both together, and now we have 2 sets.
This is a 1/6 scale statue from Kotobukiya of Darth Vader. They don't really make 1/6 stuff anymore, unfortunately, but these were a vinyl statue series they did. They weren't made very well. They were sculpted well enough and painted well enough, but they weren't made very well, and they had a hard time kind of going together, getting stuck in, etc., etc. But I did talk to Kotobukiya at Celebration 2019, and they said they were trying to get the opportunity to do 1/6 again starting next year.
My office has plenty of Star Wars stuff in it as well, including a lightsaber. We have plenty of lightsabers in the house.
This is a Gentle Giant 1/6 statue of Darth Maul. Gentle Giant is moving back into the 1/6 arena starting next year. Since Diamond kind of took control of them, they've been quiet, but they assured me they've been working on the leftover designs they've had since the takeover, and will be getting them started in release starting next year on a fairly regularly scheduled basis. So this is the other Kotobukiya 1/6 that I have, and it's not very well made either. As a matter of fact, if you take a minute, I have a piece of it here that broke off during a move, and it honestly, it doesn't take much for it to kind of fall apart. But once you have it in place, it'll kind of stay. But a piece broke off of here. They just weren't very well made. Like I said, well sculpted, well painted, just not very well built. Sort of a random shelf I have in my office of a couple droids. I got a weird like dice game thing back there that somebody gave me. I feel like if you're a Star Wars collector, there's always somebody that gets you weird Star Wars stuff that because they think that you'll like it. On this particular circumstance, my buddy Robert D knew I would not like it, so he bought it for me, but I just hide the Luke head. This is a Gentle Giant 1/6. No, this is actually probably 1/12 scale. Actually, it might even be a little bit bigger than that. Biker Scout. The cool thing about this is the Scout bike is actually floating. The speeder bike, rather. The Biker Scout is plugged into the base, and then the bike itself is plugged into the Biker Scout, and that's what gives it the illusion of floating. This is a Star Wars custom lightsaber hilt, Vader's lightsaber hilt that my buddy Paul C made me. It's all custom, like scratch built. He parted out all the pieces from a kit, or not from a kit, but from an instruction manual that he found online that was fan built, and built it and gave it to me recently, and I just had to find a more appropriate place for it, but it is quite nice. Some EU books that I haven't been able to get in hardcover yet. A Transformers Millennium Falcon. Once again, one of those gifts that was given to me because they knew I would not enjoy it, but once I put it in Falcon mode, it's cool enough. A quarter scale premium format Chewbacca statue that I just recently got for my birthday last year, along with an AT-AT that I think is from the Power of the Force line, like the re-release stuff, and then a shuttle Tydirium on this side. I have plans for a lot more quarter scale statues to kind of go in this space, so I'm not sure how long these bigger vehicles are going to stay up here, but for the time being, it looks pretty good. In my basement, I keep my 3 3/4 collection on these media cases that my father-in-law built me. They were intended for my CDs, but you know, it was a digital world. We're living in a digital world now. Kind of put the hard copies behind us. I'll be honest with you, I still haven't let them go, but I have moved on in the sense of displaying them, and I removed all my CDs, of which I had 5,000 or so. I know that's a weird flex, but we're just gonna deal with it, and replace them with all of my 3 3/4, which is comprised and organized in terms of kind of movies and trilogies and eras, be it the original trilogy, the prequel era, or the sequel era, or even some of the spin-offs. Now, my general rule with 3 3/4 nowadays is that once these spaces are full of figures, my 3 3/4 collection is finished. Regardless if they continue to make more, that will be the time in which it stops, because it's just a very challenging collection to display. I've driven myself mad over the years trying to find a way to display it. I finally have something that I'm sort of happy and content with, so once this is done, it's done. Now, my collection is split on two sides of my television in this room. I have kind of my Heroes, Rebellion, etc. on one side of the TV, and then my Imperials and bad guys, for lack of a better term, on the other side of the TV. And the villains are pretty much split up the same way. I have a shelf at the top pretty much designated for bounty hunters and randoms, and then the Empire kind of begins, you know, and As a Star Wars collector, you can't help but acquire so many Stormtroopers and Biker Scouts and Snowtroopers, etc., let alone the EU stuff. So all of that stuff takes up a fair amount of real estate. And as they continue to kind of develop characters within this era, it even becomes more and more full, placing my real estate at an even more jeopardizing position. Tons of EU stuff. I love the EU. That's not to say that I'm one of those guys that hates that the EU is no longer with us in the manner in which we always thought it was, but I do love it and appreciate it. And then my prequel era and sequel era kind of begin, and then I kind of lump in my EU stuff with them as it seems appropriate. And I put my clones over here, even though they aren't necessarily bad guys. I just put them over here because I had the space. Now eventually I want to end up doing a diorama for them in a glass table, of which I've already done 2, for a Geonosis battle, and kind of unload a lot of these clones and sort of free up some space on these cabinets, and then the time that I can collect 3 3/4 sort of extends from there and move on. Now I'll show you these glass cabinets that I've been putting these displays in for 3 3/4. They work quite well. They're called the Sham Wangs or the Sham Wows, or as I kind of privately call them sometimes, the Shang Sungs. And they're basically tables that are about 26 inches by 26 inches, and then I've built dioramas for the inside of them, and I've set them up so far in 2 major dioramas, one of which is the cantina. And I pretty much just use this because this is one of those scenes where you can display a lot of characters. It's like a big bang for your buck, you know, a big return on your investment. You can display an awful lot of characters in a very small given space, and it all kind of makes sense for them to be there, and the space really seems quite alive. Now my 3 3/4 has always been challenging to display, but in many ways I get complimented and kind of appreciated for these displays more than a lot of my other displays, which show a more quantity based or even quality based setup. It's just because this lends itself to it so well. So I strongly recommend these tables. I'll try to put a link in the description. This one sits right next to my Jabba's Palace one, and to be fair, these are really my wife's idea. She had the idea to kind of display stuff in a different sense and offer a different look at how we kind of view these smaller figures that are harder to kind of appreciate in the setting unless you are basing it off of how many you have and kind of building the world in which they live in. So we built the world, and once you build the world, you'll notice that your appreciation for them goes through the roof, and it's a lot of fun. It's something her and I have gotten into the habit of doing together. She's a fan herself, but I wouldn't say she's a mega fan or anything, but she's really appreciated kind of the artistry and the craftsmanship that's kind of gone along with this. And that's not to say that we've got it down pat or that we're professionals, but it is to say that, you know, we take pride in what we're doing and are fairly happy with how they have turned out. And we kind of got more confident in doing them by experimenting with dioramas with our 1/12 scale stuff, which is a collection comprised of Bondi and SH Figuarts and Black Series, and we've kind of built a Death Star, built Snoke's throne room, you know, and we plan on doing a lot of breakdown of these dioramas on this channel. A first order display. A lot of these are kind of made up in terms of function and also giving a good look at the scene that they're from. So you pay homage to the scene, simultaneously setting yourself up for success in creating a place and an environment that will display the figures on a variety of layers, which will allow you to kind of showcase them more than just having them front to back, elbow to elbow, nuts to butts, etc., which a lot of these figures and a lot of folks display kind of end up being. This diorama right here showcases a custom Asajj Ventress, which my buddy JD did for me, that I'll forever be appreciative of. Beautiful piece of work. But the diorama itself ends up being an homage and a display in and of itself to highlight a given area or planet that almost seems like a character to itself. So you kind of get to celebrate all angles of it. And when you actually know that you complete a given diorama, it's very rewarding when you have all the characters you need. The 1/12 stuff is definitely my most favorite kind of scale to work in regarding dioramas because it's forgiving and yet rewarding at the same kind of level. That was a custom Jason Solo that another buddy of mine did for me, and it looks fantastic. A lot of these dioramas present interesting challenges.
Some of them are as simple as this cylindrical silver things in the background of this Jedi Council room. It's just a matter of overcoming them. I've noticed a lot that like doing this stuff, it's little accent pieces like the chains and flags that end up bringing these things to life, where a lot of them can look very stale if you're not kind of decorating it to its fullest potential. It's also, like I said, once again, it's a matter of logistics and figuring out how to best display all the figures you can within a given space. Now, that's not to say that I'm an expert, but it's something I'm working on. Like the Rogue One diorama, I know that I eventually want Saul's crew over on the right. I have Solo's crew there now, but I want to put them in the Falcon. And I have another empty shelf where I want to do Palpatine's throne room as well, as soon as kind of time allows me. When we did the Octu one, my wife made this tree and is constantly kind of credited as one of the best things in my diorama, so I had to showcase that. And work within given spaces, you know, like sometimes a little shelf is better for a small cast of characters, whereas a bigger shelf lends itself to a larger group of characters, and that's kind of just up to you to distinguish what's going to be most suitable for your collection, and only you can really call that. This mural was done by the artist Jason Palmer that we picked up at Celebration 2019, and kind of tells the whole story, which is nice, but we weren't even supposed to get a hold of this thing. Like, he was not allowed to sell it at the show, which is a story for another time, but we ended up getting it anyway, and he was supposed to sign it and make it out to our family. He didn't make it out to the family, but he did sign it. But I love this thing. It's one of the most valuable things in my collection to me, and it tells everything from episode 1 through 9. I also have art that was given to me by my buddy Cody and my buddy Lee, both of different Star Wars art, as well as my oldest daughter, who made this R2-D2 for me one year for Father's Day. Now, my 3 3/4 vehicles are a little bit more challenging to display, so we've kind of put them across bookcases and such in my basement, trying our best to display them the best that we can, giving credit to as many pieces and individual pieces as we can. But it quickly becomes obvious that we're running out of space almost immediately, and we're gonna have to do something about it at some point. But that point is not today. There's only so many monsters, beasts of burden, gunships, etc., along with play sets that you can display in a given space before you realize you're out of it. And we keep the sand barge across my 1/6 scale stuff in an attempt to kind of showcase it as best we can. And that's not to say it's done extremely well, but it's done the best we can. This has a lot of our 1/6 scale stuff. The original trilogy crew kind of takes the top shelf and occupies the upper rows from good to bad. Currently underneath that we have the sequel stuff that sort of gets in afterward. And then the next couple rows we're still kind of working out. It's a mix of like prequel, spin-off stuff that we just don't know how it's all gonna quite shake out. We even got a Gentle Giant, Asajj, and Dooku statue in there for the time being as a placeholder. And the bottom row is even more so the same. Just filling in the space with 1/6 stuff that we have that we're not sure exactly where it's going to ultimately go. Now these cases are flanked by 2 light stands on either side that house a various amount of sort of unleashed stuff that is a little bit more tricky to display, but needs a space nonetheless, and the lights themselves that they sit underneath offer valuable illumination, which is always a challenge in a setup, especially in a basement when you're trying to bring light to the pieces that you've bought. But there's a fair amount of random stuff that sort of occupies little corners of the room that wherever you may look, you might come across something that you might not expect, but nonetheless has some sort of meaning or potential value in regard to the franchise. And that could be a BB-8 on the floor, Captain Rex pillow, or a custom one-of-a-kind 2 tubes for Black Series. I'm a massive 2 tubes fan, and this is the only way it looks like I'm gonna get this character. I got R2KT still sealed, hanging on the wall, as well as my daughter's namesake Black Series hung on the wall. Now, the 1/12 scale stuff sort of spills into another room where I have characters that are displayed in the main room but have variant outfits or looks or aesthetics or whatever that I've put in a separate case. I also have this Kylo Ren lightsaber that a buddy of mine got me for Christmas with Han's dice hanging from it. Now, him and another buddy of mine, that's Adam and Cape Cod John, got me this Jyn Erso blaster and painted it up for me as well. Cape Cod John printed it, and my buddy Adam painted it. The original Kenner line always holds a very nostalgic importance to me, so when they did the Black Series and those commemorative cases, I ended up getting everything they put out kind of in the first wave and hanging them across the top of a structural member of my basement, and it just worked out perfectly like it was always intended to be there. Now, this is the Nerd Rage room where we podcast, but it's also kind of a library and sort of knick-knack place.
In this room, I have a fairly impressive Star Wars collection of comics, including the entire Dark Horse trade collection, along with some randoms. There's my replacement pieces, as you see, and some random kind of knickknacks and figures that I've kind of accumulated along the way without a real place to go, including a signed picture from Carrie Fisher that I got while I was in New York. She made it out the big pipe. That's a story for another time. And a Vanity Fair on her, kind of showcasing The Last Jedi. But of course the books don't stop there, and I have pretty much all of the making and arts of, as well as hardcover collection of all the old EU stuff that sort of runs along the baseboard of my room, and extra kind of complete location, sculpting and dressing a galaxy, and visual dictionaries. And of course the McQuarrie art book, which is kind of the Star Wars Bible, for lack of a better term. Now, anybody that loves Star Wars kind of knows that family members and friends end up getting you a bunch of knickknacks that you don't really know what to do with or how to appreciate, but they know that you love Star Wars and they don't know how to show you that they know that, so they just buy you random stuff that you wouldn't necessarily buy yourself or even want. And I have this whole little stand here that I have dedicated that space to, of all things within that kind of pocket. In my movie room, we have a theatrical poster of The Empire Strikes Back, which is my personal favorite, and although I know it's cliche, it doesn't change the fact that it actually is. Some Star Wars video games. I'm not a big gamer, but I do buy all the games that come out for this franchise. And the most important thing, which is the actual films, which I keep in here on Blu-ray. I keep in here on DVD. I keep the soundtracks and some audiobooks handy. And a little R2 popcorn maker for emergencies. And even as you're walking upstairs in my house, you might find a porg just sitting somewhere, or some Star Wars figures in my kids' rooms. Which, by the way, one is named Jaina, but I think she might wish she was named Asajj, or perhaps Ahsoka. And one is named Leia. Both of them have DC characters for middle names as well. My other daughter is named Selena Kyle. But what I really appreciate about Star Wars is that it is one of the few things that all my kids kind of dig, that I'm also a fan of. A lot of stuff that I'm into, they don't really care too much about it or aren't really interested, and it's not like they're mega fans of Star Wars either, but of all the things that I'm kind of into, it's probably what they like the most overall. And it's not hard to find evidence of it, which is pretty cool, and definitely something I appreciate. Now, my wife is very supportive and understanding, and we're supposed to keep toys out of the bedroom, but even on my nightstand, I've stuck in one Vader that I'm not sure if she's aware of, to be honest with you. And there you have it. So I'm looking forward to getting into a lot of this stuff. There's a lot of things I want to talk about. There's things that I want to be critical of regarding that franchise that I don't think many people have been critical of. There's also things that I want to be positive about that I don't feel like many people have been positive about. Either way, whether it's done with a critical eye or with an eye of admiration, it's always going to be positive in regard to the franchise, because I think that's what Star Wars needs on YouTube right now. It's funny because when I started with Transformers, everything was like glowingly positive. I felt like we needed a little reality check to kind of weigh the pros and cons of stuff that was out there. We needed to praise things that were good and interesting and well built, and we needed to kind of criticize things that weren't. And I feel like Star Wars is in the opposite place. Everything is painted in a very negative light, and I need to bring a little bit of sunshine, puppy dogs and rainbows to Star Wars. But that doesn't mean that we won't be critical of some things, because there's some things that I feel like people aren't talking about that we probably need to start talking about. So if you're into Star Wars, it's good news for you. If you're not into Star Wars, just skip it, or give it a shot, or don't. I don't care. If you hate Star Wars, sorry, I don't. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Until next time, take care.